Solo, A Star Wars Story, is a new Star Wars prequel in the Star Wars anthology film series that tells the story of Han Solo and how he became what we know and love. Now, obviously, I was excited for this movie. I'm a die-hard Star Wars fan. Han Solo, easily one of my favorite movie characters ever. So of course I was very interested to see a movie that was going to tell the story how he became the smuggler that he is, the character that he is. However, I did notice in the days leading up to Solo that it was getting a very similar reaction from fans to what The Last Jedi got from fans. You know, there were some people who loved it, some people who hated it, and some people were just, you know, kind of in the middle with it. And being honest with you guys, like I always am, there were definitely things I liked in this movie, but there was also a fair amount of things that I really didn't like with this movie. Getting right into Alden Ehrenreich, I will say this right here. He does a good job as young Han Solo. I can tell that this was something he wanted to do a good job at. He really wanted to show the world what he felt maybe a young Han Solo would be like, and for the most part, I did buy it. He was cocky, he was arrogant, he was smug, you know, he doesn't really see himself as a good guy, but he does lean towards the side of good. And you know, you do see the passion in him that he wants to be a pilot, he wants to be the greatest pilot ever. That being said, I can't really quite say Alden Ehrenreich owned it as young Han Solo, and maybe it's just because, you know, when I think of Han Solo, I'm just always going to think of Harrison Ford. But at the same time, I do buy the fact that, you know, Han Solo was different when he was younger, and, you know, the older he gets, you know, he just changes, because that's the case with pretty much everybody. I just can't quite say that Alden Ehrenreich was great as a young Han Solo, but he was good. And in the beginning of this movie, he's serving as a smuggler on this planet Corellia, because you have to smuggle on this planet because that's really how you're going to survive. He and his girlfriend, played by Emilia Clarke, are trying to get off of this planet, so they're trying to bribe their way onto this Imperial ship that will get them off this planet. Han's able to get away, but Emilia Clarke, she gets abducted by the people on this planet, so she's not able to get away, which leads to Han saying, "Don't worry, I'm gonna come back for you." But this right here was kind of another problem that I had with this movie. I didn't really care for Emilia Clarke's character, certainly not really as Han Solo's love interest. I guess that's because, you know, we know what happens later on in life. You know, he eventually meets Princess Leia, you know, he falls in love with her, he has a family with her. That's who he ends up with at the end, so who cares about this other girl? I mean, we all know eventually she's gonna be irrelevant, so I don't know. I didn't really understand the point of him having a girlfriend here. So now Han knows in order to go back for Emilia Clarke, he needs to become a pilot, and to do that, he decides to join the Imperial Navy. And here's where we find out this is where Han actually got his last name. He's talking to the Imperial officer. He's like, "What's your name?" He says, "Han." It's like, "What's your last name?" He's like, "I don't have a last name. I fly alone." And he's like, "Han Solo." I'm like, oh my god, are we really back to doing this? It reminds me of what happened in Revenge of the Sith, you know, when Darth Sidious was there with Anakin and he was inducting him into the Sith, and he said, "Oh, we will name you Darth Vader." I hated it there and I hate it here too, because really right there, it doesn't make sense. Like, why couldn't Han just have the last name of Solo? Why did it have to be something that the Imperial officer had to name him? It just basically means the last name Solo doesn't mean anything. That means Ben Solo, you know, Kylo Ren from the sequel trilogy, that means his last name doesn't mean shit. It's not a name that had to do with Han's family, it's just a name some Imperial officer gave him. It loses its meaning entirely. I don't like it. 3 years later, Han's serving in the Imperial Navy, and he's eventually able to figure out that Beckett, who's played by Woody Harrelson, he's one of these commanding officers in the Imperial Navy, but he figures out that this guy's just a smuggler trying to get what he needs from the Empire. So to avoid having his cover blown, Beckett has Han just thrown into a pit to be fed by this monster. And here we discover that the monster is the Wookiee Chewbacca. And I will say this right now, Han and Chewie's relationship in this movie, I did really like it. That was definitely one of the positives in this movie. You do see a friendship grow in this movie. You see a bond develop between them. I liked seeing the great friendship that is between Han and Chewbacca develop in this movie. I like seeing where it all began, you know what I mean? And honestly, I was fine with Chewbacca being this monster that they would feed insubordinate soldiers to. I mean, he is a Wookiee. He's basically this big monster-looking creature. I mean, him eating soldiers, him eating people, that didn't really bother me. The problem I did have was seeing Han being able to speak Chewie's language, being able to talk like a Wookiee. You see Han and Chewie talking to each other in Wookiee language. Han's basically saying to Chewie, it's like, "Oh, I can get us out of here, and, you know, we can do what we need to do." But I don't buy Han being able to speak like a Wookiee. That, again, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't feel right to me. I I mean, obviously we saw in, you know, every movie with Han and Chewie that Han and Chewie have been able to communicate with each other. You know, Han can understand Chewie, Chewie can understand Han, but I never at any point took that as Han's able to actually speak the Wookiee language. I mean, we've never at any point seen Chewbacca speak English. I always took their ability to understand each other as just a sign of how strong their friendship is, how strong their bond is. Like, their bond, it goes beyond words. It just doesn't make sense that Han's now able to just do what he can do with his vocal cords and speak the Wookiee language. So yeah, the two of them are able to escape, and at this point Beckett's like, alright, the two of you can come on board and join my crew. He reveals to the two of them that the plan is to go to Vandor and steal this coaxium to give to Paul Bettany. And do like seeing around this time, you know, Beckett's becoming kind of a mentor to Han, you know, explaining to him what it means to be a smuggler. And at one point, he breaks down his rifle into a little blaster, and he gives it to Han, which essentially is his blaster. Which I honestly did like right there. I like seeing Han getting his blaster from someone who was a mentor to him, who was kind of, you know, a role model to him. And seeing the fact that it was essentially a rifle that was just reconstructed into a blaster, it helps me buy a little bit more why Han's blaster is as powerful as it is. So they go to Vandor, they get the coaxium, they're gonna bring it back to Paul Bettany, but they get intercepted by this group of, I don't know what they are, Cloud Riders, that's led by someone by the name of Enfys Nest, or Enfys Nest. I'm just gonna refer to them as Nest, because I can't pronounce that first name. This leads to the coaxium getting destroyed, and Nest and the Cloud Riders killing two members of Beckett's crew, which included Beckett's girlfriend. Which right there now has me wondering, okay, what was the point of those two crew members? Literally, they do absolutely nothing in this movie. I mean, they're part of Beckett's crew, you know, they get the coaxium, and then they both die. Why couldn't it have just been like Beckett was just this loner smuggler who needed some help? He meets Han and Chewie, he's like, hey, you two want to come with me? We'll do this mission, get you both paid, you know, everything will work out for us. We'll be a good team. Honestly, if they had done something like that, the movie would be no different. In fact, I think the movie would have made a little more sense. These other two characters, there was no need for them. In fact, I'd almost completely forgotten they were even in the movie. So Han, Beckett, and Chewie, they go to meet with Paul Bettany, who's, I guess, supposed to be the villain of this movie, but really, he's only in like a scene and a half. And he does a good job when he's in this movie, but that's just it. He's really hardly in this movie. You know, they explain to him that the coaxium was destroyed, and they're gonna try to find a way to get him to, you know, not kill them for fucking up. So Han brings up the idea, hey, let us go to Kessel, and we'll get you unrefined coaxium. It's a very risky plan, but this coaxium would be much better for what Paul Bettany needs, so he's like, alright, I will allow this. I'll give you guys another chance. Paul Bettany also sends his top lieutenant to go with them, who just so happens to be Emilia Clarke. Yeah, apparently she's been working with him, I guess, pretty much the entire time. I know, at least in some point when she was taken away by the people on that planet she and Han were with at the beginning. So now they know if they're gonna pull this heist off, they need a ship, and a fast ship. So Emilia Clarke suggests, hey, let's go talk to Lando Calrissian. He owns the ship, the Millennium Falcon. Maybe we can get him to lend the ship to us. So we do meet Lando Calrissian, who's played by Donald Glover, and I'm gonna say this right now, Donald Glover was excellent as young Lando. The way he spoke, the things he said, the way he presented himself, I completely bought him as young Lando. I'm just like, yeah, this is him. This is young Lando, alright. So Han and Lando, they try to gamble for the ship, but Lando cheats, so he gets to keep the ship and takes everything from Han. But after he hears about the mission, he talks to the crew and he says, alright, you know what? If you give me a percentage of what we make off of this, I'll help you guys and we can use the Millennium Falcon. Now, some people had a problem with the way the Millennium Falcon looked in this movie because I guess its front is a little more narrow, it's a little more elongated. Some people had a problem with that, how it was just a gimmick to sell toys. I personally was okay with that. I mean, the Millennium Falcon's been around for a long time. I could buy that towards that time, you know, something could have happened that made it look a little different. It suffered some damages or whatever. So yeah, Lando and his droid co-pilot L337 have joined the crew, and now they're gonna go to Kessel to get the coaxium. I gotta tell you right now, L337, she just annoyed me as a character. She's one of those droids who hates that droids are slaves. You know, she feels that droids should have the same rights as living organic beings, something like that. And I was just like, oh my god, you're one of those characters? Fuck me. I mean, I'm totally fine with her, I guess, wanting equal rights for droids, but the fact that she's like so over the top with it, so in your face with it, it kind of pissed me off. And as the crew is infiltrating the mine, L337 orchestrates like a slave revolt for all the droids to just, you know, attack all these, you know, guards that are in this facility. This revolt leads to Lando getting injured and L337 being destroyed. And really, I didn't give a shit when L337 died. I mean, normally, I really like the droid characters that have been in Star Wars movies. L337 died and, you know, Lando's holding her in his arms. I'm just like, I'm sorry, but I feel nothing. I guess that could also be the one issue that I had with Lando in this movie. It's not really an issue with him, but it's what the writers did. I guess the writers made a big reveal like, oh, Lando Calrissian is pansexual. The whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm just like, there's absolutely no sign anywhere in this movie of him being pansexual. So what's the point in having him be pansexual? I've always seen Lando as a ladies' man. That's what he was in Empire Strikes Back. That's what I saw him as in this movie. I guess the writers were trying to say like, oh, as he was cradling L3 as she died, that's who he had feelings for, but I didn't really saw it like that. I mean, sure, he had maybe some affection for the droid, but not like a sexual manner I really saw it as. It kind of felt like the writers are being like, oh, hey, look, LGBT community, Lando's pansexual, watch the movie, please. That's honestly what it came off as. So now they have the coaxium, but since it's unrefined, they have to process it, because if they don't in a certain amount of time, that's just gonna blow up and kill everyone on the ship. However, one thing that I did like that they did with L3 is, I guess, the navigation system that's in her programming, they took that out and they put it in the Millennium Falcon, which I guess to a point kind of makes her a part of the Millennium Falcon. That was something I did like, because it does make the Millennium Falcon more than just a ship. It makes it a bit of a character. So yeah, like I said, wasn't a fan of L3 as a character, but I will say I do appreciate that. So now this is when the big Kessel Run that we've all heard about in Star Wars lore happens, and I'm gonna say right now, I actually really like this moment. Han has to pilot the ship through uncharted territory. To do so, he has to go through this really big scary maelstrom that's in space. They're also getting attacked by like a giant space squid. This does result in the Falcon suffering some damages, which makes it look like what it is now, but Han's able to pull off the Kessel Run in, what was it, 20 parsecs? I know in A New Hope they said it was less than 12 parsecs, and then in The Force Awakens they said it was 12 parsecs, and now they're saying it's, what, 20 parsecs? Maybe Han was just changing the story every time, just make him seem like more of a badass, but he still pulled it off, and I gotta say, I thought it was awesome to see. So they make it to Savareen, which is where Paul Bettany is. Now they gotta process the fuel to present it to him. And here's once again where the crew runs into Ness and the Cloud Riders, and here we discovered that they're actually not pirates at all. They are the start of a rebellion. Ness takes off her helmet. You see that she's just this young kid. Yeah, and she's also a she. And it's in this moment, the crew, Han especially, is kind of sympathetic to the cause. They do realize that they can't give this to Paul Bettany, because this will give the Empire more power. So they ultimately say, alright, we'll help you out. We're all friends now. What I don't really get, though, is how quickly Beckett was able to just be on board with that. I mean, he completely forgets that Ness is the one that killed his girlfriend earlier in the movie, and you're just gonna completely forget all about that, and you're gonna help this girl? I don't know, if that were me, I would have shot her in the face and been like, yeah, fuck you and fuck your stupid rebellion. But yeah, I guess Beckett forgot all about his girlfriend like we forgot about the character at that point in the movie. So yeah, Han tries to trick Paul Bettany with this fake coaxium, but Paul Bettany, he's wise to the act because someone had informed him that Han was gonna betray him. And yeah, the doors open up, that's going to reveal, you know, who it was that betrayed Han. And you know, the movie's trying to make out like, oh, who might have betrayed him? The whole time I'm sitting there like, oh, it's gonna be Beckett. And sure enough, Beckett walks through the door. I'm just like, yep, there it is. Because, you know, it completely goes back to what Beckett had said much earlier in the movie to Han. It was like, don't trust anyone, kid. However, apparently Han was wise to the act that Beckett was going to betray him, so he tipped off Nest and her crew that Paul Bettany was going to send his crew to kill them. So, Ness and her crew, they killed Paul Bettany's soldiers. So now Beckett leaves with the coaxium, takes Chewbacca with him as a hostage, while in the meantime, Emilia Clarke and Han Solo, they do battle with Paul Bettany. And it's here Emilia Clarke kills Paul Bettany, and now at this point, Emilia Clarke, she tells Han, it's like, I love you, but go after Chewie, save him, stop Beckett. I'll be alright right here. But it's at this point, Emilia Clarke, she turns on the hologram and she proceeds to speak with Paul Bettany's superior, who just so happens to be Darth Maul. She informs Darth Maul of the mission's failure. You know, Darth Maul's kind of pissed off about that because I guess he has this big revenge mission that he wants to plan. Then he activates his dual-ended lightsaber, and that's the last we see of Darth Maul. I gotta tell you right now, I don't really have a problem with Darth Maul being in this movie, but I do now have a lot of questions. Or I guess you should rather say I had a lot of questions after this movie. Then I discovered, apparently, after Darth Maul was defeated in Phantom Menace, I guess, you know, he was kept alive. He got the bionic legs that we just saw in the movie. And apparently he went crazy, developed a hatred for the Sith, but he still has a hatred for Obi-Wan and the Jedi, so I guess now he's like an evil, independent Force user. But it does still leave me with a lot of questions. I do want this movie to at least explain to us how Darth Maul is still alive. I know Star Wars Rebels explained that, but I know some people don't really consider Star Wars Rebels canon, so I hope if they're going to make more solo movies, which I heard they're going to, I hope they explain why Darth Maul is, you know, alive. And it just has has me wondering, it's like, was Darth Maul really needed to be in this movie? I don't think he was. I mean, really, he's on screen for a minute, he activates his lightsaber, and he briefly talks to Emilia Clarke about this plan he has. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like setup for a sequel, and nothing more. I just don't really understand why the movie felt it needed to have the villain from The Phantom Menace be in this movie to make it, I don't know, better. And that just also presents another issue I have with this movie. The movie doesn't really have a clear villain. At first, maybe you think the villain is Ness, but then you find out Ness is just this young girl who's actually a good guy trying to organize this rebellion, which, you know, we've seen a million times over with different stories about how the rebellion started. You could argue that the villain of this movie is Paul Bettany, but he's really only in a scene and a half, and then we find out that he has a superior who is Darth Maul, so it's like, is Darth Maul the real villain of this movie? The movie doesn't have a really clear villain, and that's a problem because you look at every Star Wars movie, they've all had a clear villain. The original trilogy had Darth Vader, the sequel trilogy so far has had Kylo Ren, Rogue One had Orson Krennic, The Phantom Menace had Darth Maul, Attack of the Clones had Count Dooku, Revenge of the Sith had General Grievous, but then you could argue Palpatine was the main villain of this movie, but then Anakin turned evil, so he was a villain in the movie. Alright, fine, Revenge of the Sith is not a good example of that either, but every other movie, yeah, they had a clear villain. This one doesn't. I think that's a problem. But at this point, Han's gone after Beckett to stop him and to save Chewie, and he's able to do that by shooting the unarmed Beckett. Which I will say, there I did like. I also appreciate that because it goes back to the original saying, you know, Han shot first, and here, yeah, Han shot first. He shot the unarmed Beckett, which some might argue is more dark than Han shooting Greedo because Greedo was armed and had a gun pointed at Han. In this case, Beckett was unarmed. But I didn't really mind that. Beckett had evil intentions. In this point, Han can't really think things through. It's like, yeah, I gotta kill him. So yeah, he shot Beckett. So yeah, there you go, George Lucas. Han has always shot first. You never had to do anything about that scene in A New Hope. So anyways, Han then leaves the Coaxium with Nest and her crew. She said that this will be the start of a true rebellion. She offers Han a place to join them, but he declines. But she says, you may come around at some point. He's like, don't hold your breath, kid. That's a moment of dialogue that I will say I appreciate it because we do know along the way Han does indeed join the rebellion. He then meets back up with Lando. He's figured out that Lando's been cheating these gamblings, so he at this point is able to re-challenge Lando for the Millennium Falcon again. This time Han wins, he gets the Falcon, and he and Chewie then make their way to Tatooine to meet up with this gangster that's putting a crew together. Which now has me wondering, oh, if they make a sequel to Solo a Star Wars story, is it going to be Han and Chewie meeting Jabba the Hutt? And then, I don't know, Darth Maul's gonna be thrown in there somewhere? I don't really know. So all in all, I gotta be honest with you guys, because I always am. In my opinion, Solo, a Star Wars story, was not a good movie. As I said, Alden Ehrenreich does a good job as a young Han Solo. For the most part, I bought him as a young Han Solo. I like seeing the dynamic between Chewbacca and Han Solo. I like seeing the friendship develop between them as the movie goes along. There are also certain aspects of Han's past that I like seeing. You know, I like the way Han got his blaster. I liked seeing the Millennium Falcon become what it was. I liked seeing the Millennium Falcon. Donald Glover was great as Lando. I thought he was one of the best parts of this movie. Easily. The Kessel Run was cool. The action when it happens is pretty entertaining. The problem is the movie is so slow throughout like the first 2/3 of it. There were a bunch of characters in this movie that were just not needed at all. Emilia Clarke, I didn't think her character was really necessary. The two crew members with Beckett, I didn't think they were necessary. Woody Harrelson was alright as Beckett. I didn't think he was a very memorable character either. The movie has like 3 different villains at one point. That just makes it feel messy. I hate the way they gave Han his name. I didn't necessarily mind Darth Maul being in the movie, but I do feel he was kind of shoehorned into it. In the end, for me, the negatives outweighed the positives on this movie, and I'm honestly wondering if Solo a Star Wars story was really a necessary movie. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe. I will see you all next time.